Alright guys, today we are gonna be reacting to how could have been the Cold War if Germany had won World War II. Thank you so much for the support guys. We're gonna simply here jump in and see what's going on here in the video. Like always guys, make sure you guys subscribe to my channel before you move forward. Let's jump in.
June 1946. The Second World War has been over for a month. It started in 1939 and ended after 6 years of violent fighting, with an armistice between the Axis, the Soviets, and the Allied powers. It happened that in December 1942, after the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor, Hitler and Mussolini did not declare war on the United States of America, so America was never directly involved in the war in Europe. What happened at this point? It happened that there were two separate world wars. A war in the Pacific between the USA and Japan, and a war in Europe with the Axis against the British and the Soviet Union. In the Pacific, the war ended with an American victory, as in our timeline. Without the European distraction, the USA could use its full might against Japan and defeated it in 1946, using another 9 atomic bombs, apart from Hiroshima and Nagasaki. But in Europe, without a direct American intervention, things were different. Operation Overlord, the landing in Normandy, was impossible. No Operation Torch in North Africa. The Italians were able to hold on in Libya. No American bombers over the German cities. No landing in Sicily. The Soviets were stopped somewhere in Ukraine and Belarus. Resources were enormous, but not endless, and American lend-lease in this situation was greatly reduced. The war became a gigantic and costly stalemate, and in spring 1946, everyone had had enough. May 1946. There is a peace conference in Paris in which all the representatives of the powers involved in the European war participated. Germany has to leave all the occupied territories, but obtain the lands they lost after World War I. Poland, Belarus, and Ukrainian nations are established. The Baltic states are independent. Finland's borders remained as they were in 1940, as were most of the European borders in other parts of the continent. Yugoslavia was dismembered. There is Serbia and Croatia. Germany annexed northern Slovenia. Italy gained the remainder of Slovenia, Dalmatia, and Montenegro. Bulgaria gained Macedonia. Ante Pavelic is the Croatian dictator. Serbia is headed by Milan Nedic. Serbia is the only country that remains under German military occupation. Tito escaped.
Yo,
Serbia is the only country that remains under German military occupation.
that march, man. That's some old school marching style, bro.
Tito escaped to London.
Tito. Tito.
Although the Germans retire their divisions from occupied countries, most of the occupied countries remain under their sphere of influence. Hungary is now under Horthy's leadership. Antonescu is the Romanian Prime Minister. In Bulgaria, the 9-year-old Simeon II is on the throne. The regent is the Prime Minister, Dobry Buzhilov. Quisling rules Norway. These are all pro-Axis governments. Poland, the Baltic states, Ukraine, and Belarus are only formally independent. Their future was one of the main topics at the Paris conference. Hitler claimed that only a pro-German government in those countries would be able to guarantee the security of Germany, and at the end the Allies agreed to the formation of new pro-German governments on those lands, and the withdrawal of their recognition of the Polish government in exile. Ignacio Ziwiz, former commander of the NSC National Armed Forces, a Polish military organization operating from 1942, is the general governor of Poland. Ukraine is led by the Ukrainian National Council, consisting of 130 delegates who represent all Ukrainian lands, but with few powers.
And again, this is not true, right? But I forget to think that this is only if Germany won.
Radoslaw Ostrowski is the president of the Belarusian Central Council. In France, the Germans support Pétain, who remains head of the French government. In Denmark, Belgium, and the Netherlands, the pre-war governments are restored after they ensure their neutrality. Indonesia is independent soon after the war. After the agreements of the Conference of Paris, Greece is now under British influence, but
What?
there's a strong communist guerrilla.
What?
situation in Asia. Japan loses all their foreign territories. There is a civil war in China. There is no Soviet intervention in the Far East, so Korea is united. India is independent. After the two world wars, the world is divided into three blocks. The Communist bloc, the Soviet Union, and China. The Axis in Europe, the Allies led by the United States of America and United Kingdom. A Cold War between the three blocs soon starts.
After the war, Germany is the second world power. Despite the two being the main enemies, the British Empire and the Soviet Union have not been defeated. Meanwhile, Hitler rules over most of Europe. At Hitler's side, there is Himmler, the second in command, then Joseph Goebbels and Martin Bormann. Karl Dönitz is the Minister of War. The rising stars of the Nazi party are Arthur Axmann, former leader of the Hitlerjugend. He lost his right arm on the Eastern Front in 1941, and Else Hirsch, who during the war was a 20-year-old captain of the Bund Deutscher Jugend, the League of German Girls.
Wow.
Gudrun Himmler, daughter of Heinrich Himmler, and former generals of the Second World War like von Bock and Guderian have important roles. Göring himself died of cancer in 1951. The British handed Rudolf Hess over to the Germans at the end of the war. Hitler forgave Hess, but he no longer had any important role in the Nazi party and committed suicide in 1948.
Wow. Whoa. Whoa.
Berlin has been rebuilt by Albert Speer, the main architect.
This is the big city that we were talking about last time, right? And we reacted to.
The German capital is reorganized along a central 5-kilometer-long boulevard, the Prachtallee. This boulevard also serves as a parade ground. At the northern end of the avenue, there is a square of 350,000 square meters, the Großer Platz. This square is surrounded by the Führer's Palace on the west side, the Reichstags building on the east side, and the Third Reich Chancellery and the High Command of the German Army on the south side. On the north side of the square, there is the Volkshalle, designed by Hitler himself. It's the largest enclosed space in the world, 200 meters high and 250
Wow.
meters in diameter.
Dang, that's good. That's
Top
big.
of the Volkshalle, there is the Reichsadler, symbol of the Germans. Towards the southern end of the avenue, a triumphal arch, 100 meters high, had been built. The constructions were completed just in time for Hitler's 70th birthday in 1959. Berlin was renamed into Germania, but this name was rarely used.
Okay.
Germany has to face
So supposedly they did build Germania in Berlin, but they're not calling it Germania.
the eastern countries, as happened to the Soviets in our timeline, especially the Polish. There are attacks by terrorist groups, with officials assassinated and even civilian airliners bombed in flight. In 1952, there is the Warsaw Uprising against the Polish general government and its German policies. The revolt quickly spreads and the government collapsed. Some local leaders were lynched. The Germans moved over to crush the revolution. A large Wehrmacht force invaded Warsaw and other regions of the country. Over 4,000 Polish, 300 German troops were killed in the conflict. Mass arrests and denunciations continued for months thereafter. Germany has to maintain a huge army, not only to crush revolts, but because the Soviets are still in the east, eager to take revenge.
Wow, shout out to these people, man.
To build a fleet.
Yo,
In 1960, the
shout out to these people with this documentary. We're just entertaining the notion that what if Germany won, right?
had 8 aircraft carriers. Several attempts of Germanization were made in the east, especially in Belarus and Ukraine, with mixed results. The hope to colonize a third of Europe with the depleted German population, while having lost more than 1 million men in the war, proved to be utopian.
Great Britain lost most of, but not all of its empire before 1960. India became independent in 1947, then Burma, Ceylon, the Middle East, and other African colonies. Its economy is in great trouble. They had been spending all of its assets to purchase American weapons, and now Britain's war debt is a millstone around the neck of the British economy. The elections of 1946 were lost by Winston Churchill, and the Prime Minister became Clement Attlee. Great Britain is almost the only destination of the Marshall Plan. The USA is the main world power. After the war, they replaced the British Empire. Now, most of the former British colonies are in their sphere of influence. There was no Soviet intervention in Manchuria. The Americans occupied the whole of the Korean peninsula. The wars solved their own economic problems, and now they are the main world economy. Truman lost the election in 1948. There were too many losses in the war with Japan, especially in the invasion of Kyushu during Operation Downfall, the invasion of Japan, with hundreds of kamikazes crashing into any landing craft depositing troops on Japanese beaches.
Wow.
Thomas Dewey becomes the American president, then Adlai Stevenson, then in 1960, Kennedy. However, the United States of America is a first-rate world power, but not the dominant power. The problem, more than the Soviets, is Germany. The USA comes into conflict with German mercantilism in a similar way to which they are now with China in our timeline. Germany is active in Africa and South America, challenging American supremacy in all spheres. South Africa becomes an ally of Germany.
Wow.
Blacks remain an underclass, as in the USA. One of the causes of the end of apartheid in the United States of America in our timeline was because the black American soldiers who fought in Europe were treated with respect in Germany, as other soldiers in Italy. And when they returned home, they refused to be second-class citizens. This does not happen in this timeline.
Wow.
The Soviet Union. Stalin was overthrown and executed in 1946.
Damn.
His popularity was eroded by what was seen as defeat in the Second World War. Stalin's death triggered a power struggle in which Khrushchev emerged victorious, and now he is the first secretary of the party's Central Committee. Khrushchev presided over the beginning of de-Stalinization, enactment of relatively liberal reforms in domestic policy. There are ideological tensions with the USA, but the vast majority of the Red Army and missiles are deployed along the Iron Curtain. The Chinese Civil War between the Kuomintang and the Communist forces ended with Mao's victory in 1950. After the defeat of Japan, the Soviets backed Mao. The KMT government retreated to the island of Taiwan on December 7, 1946. There is no Korean War, and the US are reluctant in offering full support for Chiang in their final stand against China. In January 1951, the Chinese invaded Taiwan with an amphibious operation.
Uh-oh.
The relationships with the Soviets are difficult. Mao admires Stalin and rejected the changes in Moscow. However, the Soviet Union and China are the only communist states in the world. They have to collaborate. Persia. The Soviet Union refused to withdraw from Persia, citing threats to Soviet security, and proclaimed the separatist Azerbaijan People's Government and the Kurdish separatist Republic of Mahabad. Germany, Italy, and Britain sent an expeditionary force in what was seen by Mussolini as the repetition of the Spanish War. This was the only time the Axis and British troops fought together. After some negotiations, the Soviets accepted and withdrew, but they maintained the presence, and an Afghan-style war continued in those lands.
India follows almost our timeline. After the independence, there are tensions between Hindus and Muslims, and in 1948, British India is partitioned into the Union of India and the Dominion of Pakistan.
This is what we know today, right?
It's partitioned into the Union of India.
Yeah. So this is.
And the Dominion of Pakistan. The Cuban crisis does not happen. Obviously, there are no USA deployments of missiles in Italy and Turkey, so there is no need for the Soviets to place nuclear missiles on the island, and the Soviets do not want to risk a war with the USA, with the Germans right at their gate. In Korea, the Communist Workers' Party opposes the US, and with the support of China, organizes a network of clandestine cells with a considerable following. In March 1948, it instigated a general strike, and on April 3rd, 1948, the party led a popular revolution on Jeju Island. In the suppression of the revolt, thousands of islanders were killed.
Wow.
An armed guerrilla struggle starts. France. After the death of Pétain in 1951, Pierre Laval, with the German support, becomes the prime minister, with full powers, with a similar governance to Germany. France is a German ally. They lose part of the empire occupied by the British, but maintains Tunisia, Algeria, Morocco, and Indochina. The Algerian Revolution is crushed with the help of the Germans, who sent an expeditionary force, the New Africa Corps.
Yo, man, that's a lot of proxy wars afterward. Man. I didn't realize how many proxy wars happened after World War II. And record, this is a different timeline, but it just tells you that after World War II, the power at B were not stable. Things were very unstable, and people are just hungry for power. They can see where there's some holes and there's things that need to be fixed, or they're not strong enough, and they see that and they create that.
Mussolini is strong in Italy after the Italian Night of the Long Knives of 1943, in which several traitors were executed, Ciano and Badoglio first. The decolonization of the former European colonial empires is slowed. In 1960, Italy, Spain, and Portugal still have their colonies.
Wow.
The level of technology in the 1960s is slightly more advanced than in our timeline, particularly jet airliners,
Really?
televisions, and computers. The space race, the competition for the space between the three Cold War rivals, the Soviet Union, the USA, and Germany, for the moment is won by Germany thanks to their superiority in ballistic missile technology. The Germans launched the first artificial Earth satellite, the Siegfried 1, on October 4th, 1953, then sent the first human to space, Peter Muller, on April 12th,
What?
1957. The German space program is still based at the rocket testing facility at Peenemünde on the Baltic coast. The Holocaust happens in the same way as in our timeline. More than 1 million Jews died during the Second World War, but this massacre is effectively buried in history in a conflict that caused 70 million deaths.
Wow.
Racial segregation and apartheid practices are normalized in Europe, along with nationalism and pride in their heritage and culture. After the Second World War, tens of thousands of Jewish refugees attempted to enter Palestine by ship. Most of the ships are intercepted by the Italian and German Navy and by the Royal Navy. The refugees are rounded up and placed in detention camps in Cyprus or Libya. There will be no Israel, but after the British evacuation of Palestine, the Jewish insurgency rises up with a series of widespread guerrilla raids. After the USA, other countries develop nuclear weapons.
Uh-oh.
Hitler never liked the atomic technology, and despite the high quality and power of the German warheads, the number of their nukes remains limited. The Germans tested their nukes in Ukraine, underground, and in Libya with Italian concession. The United Nations will never be founded.
Huh.
And nobody will miss it.
Damn, bro. That's a strong statement. The United Nations will never existed, and nobody will miss it. Damn.
1947. In Vietnam, a war begins between French forces against the Viet Minh, led by Ho Chi Minh. The conflict rapidly turns into a conventional war between two armies equipped with weapons supplied by Germany, the United States, China, and the Soviet Union. General of the Vietnamese army uses efficient tactics of guerrilla warfare,
Yep.
convoy ambushes, to impede land and air supply deliveries.
Oh,
In
wow.
May 1954, the French are decisively defeated at Dien Bien Phu and start to quit Indochina. Waiting for new elections, Vietnam is temporarily cut in half. Ho Chi Minh controls North Vietnam. The south is under Bo Dai, the Vietnamese emperor. Cambodia and Laos are independent. But France has strong ties with Germany, and the German headquarters have the same idea as the CIA and the Americans had in our timeline: bring part of French Indochina under their control.
Oh,
Hitler
wow.
is aware that if Germany wants to remain a world power, they will need more than influence in Eastern Europe and a few African landholdings here and there. They need to extend their influence in military bases all around the planet. During a meeting at Verona with Mussolini, Hitler says, "We need to make our world power credible, and Vietnam looks like the place." October 1955, the Germans are on the move. The South Vietnamese Prime Minister Ngo Dinh Diem, with German support, deposes Emperor Bao Dai. A more authoritarian government is created. By 1959, the German military presence in South Vietnam is raised to 80,000 military personnel. 3 German aircraft carriers are deployed near the Vietnamese coast. Some of the best German Waffen-SS units are moved to Saigon. A war is starting.
Uh-oh. So basically, World War III at that point. Am I crazy? So at that point, you were talking about World War III. So that didn't last that long. Damn, we were doing so good. But some of this stuff looked very unrealistic. Germany being allied with France, like all this stuff looked very unrealistic. And some of the timeline is very congruent to what we have today. So that makes no sense. I don't know. I would love to hear you guys' opinion. Let me know what you guys think, guys. I would love to hear you guys' opinion on this. And don't hold back, okay, in the comment section. I'll see you next one.